Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you are joining us. My name is Bo Broadbeck with Auburn University Extension, and we will be starting our job costing webinar in a few minutes. But as is our tradition with the Raising Trees webinar series, as with the Tree Fund webinar series that we run as well, please use the chat function and let us know where you're coming from. It's always fun to see where people are joining this webinar from. Welcome, New Mexico. So reaching the Southwest. Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome. Pensacola, Florida. Welcome, Shane, just down the road. I'm here in Fairhope, Alabama. Dallas, South Florida. California. All right. Hi, John from Florida. Welcome. Boy, Latvia. Somebody coming from a slightly different time zone. Thank you for being here. Hong Kong. Always a pleasure to see our audiences from Asia. Savannah, Georgia, Durham, North Carolina. Welcome, everybody, to the Raising Trees Job Costing webinar today. We will be getting started in about a minute. As is our tradition, please let us know where you're coming from as you sign in using the chat function. Welcome, Deidre. Bienvenidos, Puerto Rico. Welcome, Georgia. Welcome, North Carolina. I hope y'all are recovering up there in the Cashiers area after a hurricane. Welcome, Seattle, Colorado. Welcome, South California. Well, good afternoon. My clock is reading 12 Central. I'd like to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Raising Trees webinar series. This is a special series that we're doing in conjunction with several partners. We're working with the University of Georgia on this series, as well as the Georgia Arborist Association. We're very happy to have them as partners on this series as we're launching this new, I would call it a mini series on what we are calling the business of arboriculture. It's a series that is really looking not on how we manage and care for trees, but the business that surrounds tree cares. We put a lot of effort into making sure we prune trees correctly, plant them correctly, preserve them during construction, whatever the topic might be. But a lot of y'all, especially in commercial arboriculture, are running businesses. And so we wanted a series, an introductory series that would begin to introduce y'all to the business of tree care and also the importance of becoming certified arborists and the professionalism and the careers that are available through arboriculture through this series. I would like to note that this series is being funded. This was being funded through a grant through the U.S. Forest Service, really looking at professional development within the tree care industry. So we want to thank them as our sponsors to this series. So by way of introduction, I forgot to say, my name is Bo Broadbeck. I work with Auburn University Extension, and I would like to just give a second to Jesse to provide a quick introduction to one of our partners, GAA.
Thanks, Bo, and thank you for allowing us to put together this webinar. It's always nice to be able to offer free learning opportunities and for so many of you to join us. So I look forward to this presentation and hosting the future presentations in this series, and I hope you'll join us for the rest of the presentations throughout 2025.
Thank you, Jesse. And Jesse, would you remind me, when is the next webinar in this series? Do we have that?
So the next one is going to be in January. We don't actually have that on the calendar yet, but I will be, once I have all the information necessary, it will the registration will be very similar, only with a working Zoom link next time, hopefully. The registration process will be very similar to this. And then in hopes to, once we get into 2025, you'll hopefully only have to register once, and then you can continue through the series.
Perfect. Perfect. And as usual, I'll also continue to advertise through my Raising Trees listserv that many of y'all get emails as well. But I think you can go to the GAA webpage and see that, and that's where we'll be listing that for this mini series. A couple of housekeeping items. As we get into the series, we have the chat function. Many of y'all have found that. It's a great way for y'all to communicate amongst yourselves. Please keep it professional. But if you have questions that you would like me to bring to the attention of the speaker, please find that Q&A box down at the bottom, and I will bring those to the attention of Mr. Ickes either during or after the presentation, depending on the question. For those of you that got my listserv from Raising Trees, we are going to offer CEUs for this webinar series. I think my email said we weren't, but I guess I lied. We are. And so for those looking for CEUs, they are available. And Jesse is going to launch at the end of this webinar, a link for y'all to be able to put in your certification numbers. And please be aware you need to be on for the entirety of the webinar to capture CEUs, and we will submit those on your behalf directly to ISA. Jesse, did I get that right? Is there any other nuances that you do?
Nope, just stay on till the end and I'll drop it in the chat.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker, I'll tell you all, he is no stranger to me. He actually resides just down the road from me here a few miles. I've known Gary Ickes for, gosh, Gary, since 2008. Gary is an ISA board certified arborist since 2005. He was actually the first board certified arborist we had in Alabama. He has worked in the tree care for more than 30 years. In addition to being an ISA BCMA, Gary is also an ISA municipal specialist and also tree risk assessment qualified and a tree care industry associate certified tree safety professional. Gary, it is a pleasure to have you on the series of the business of arboriculture today, and I will turn the virtual floor over to you.
Well, thank you, Bo, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm also second guessing whether this was going to be as much fun because I'm starting to get a little nervous now. But that usually.
Gary, you're a pro. I wouldn't worry about it. Known you for years.
Yes, sir. Well, hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be presenting this to y'all, and it is job costing, how not to pay your clients to work for them. So today we'll be looking at how to determine your hourly cost to operate your business. This is very important. Once you determine this cost, you'll be able to better price your proposals to be more profitable. All the dollar amounts used in this presentation are made up. For several reasons, including legal reasons, I cannot use my real numbers for expenses, payroll, or sales. I hope that you will find this information useful, and I hope, and I'm sorry, and I know that this may not work for everyone, but I hope it works for you. And of course, tech issue. There we go. Now, I'm many things in life, but I'm not a tax professional, accountant, or a bookkeeper. I'm an arborist who's grown a business by making many mistakes. And I promise you, if you've made a mistake, I've probably made it myself, and learning from them. A little luck and a lot of hard work are the reasons why I'm still here today. This presentation is my opinion on many things and may not be the common way to do job cost analysis, but it works for me. It works very well for us. We're a small company of 8 employees. We offer the normal tree care services, plus plant health care and consulting. The business was started in the 70s by my father and brought to coastal Alabama in 1979. We have over 45 years in business here. I've been blessed to manage the company from 1992 until 1997 when I purchased the company. If I'd been a lot smarter at 18 years old, I would have picked an easier industry to be in. Because I want every presentation to end better than it starts, I've started telling a dad joke at the beginning. This way, the presentation can only get better, I hope. How do you get a farmer to date you? A tractor. So early in my career, I did not know how much it cost me per hour to operate my business. When I graduated high school, I was handed the keys to the business and told to sink or swim. I didn't have any business training when I started. I copied what had been done before me, and I did not know what it cost to operate the company. I learned hard lessons about underbidding work because of not knowing what it cost me to operate. I guessed at the amount I needed to make per hour. I was lucky and covered the bills most of the time. And when I say bills, I'm not talking about profit. There were many times that I paid a client to work for them since I was not always making a profit. Since I wasn't making a profit, there was times that I didn't have the money to sometimes fix or buy equipment, and I realized that there had to be a better way to do this. So how do I pay a client to work for them? Let's take a hypothetical scenario. If it costs me $400 per hour to operate my business, but I don't know that, and I bid the work at $390 per hour, I've just paid my client $10 per hour, or lost $10 per hour to work for my client. If I'm not making a profit, or even worse, not covering my bills, I won't stay in business long, but I was very lucky. I figured out my mistakes and corrected them in time. And what I mean when I say I paid a client to work for them is, since I didn't charge enough money, it ended up costing me money, which is, in my opinion, the same thing as paying them directly. How do I know how much to charge? Well, that's a good question. I figured it out by a little luck and a lot of trial and error. So how do you do it? If you don't have a plan, how do you know what to charge? Do you know if you lose money on your job? Scientific wild ass guessing, and that generally does not work when it comes to tree businesses. If you have a plan, is it working for you? And then hiring a professional is sometimes the best option if you don't keep good records or have an understanding of some basic record keeping or accounting requirements. Well, I do have a plan. I use a fairly simple cost analysis spreadsheet that I made. After realizing I wasn't as smart as I thought in my early 20s, I started looking around, and I found a basic book on business and started learning from it. The first cost analysis that I did was just a few numbers and some guessing. It didn't work well, but it showed me that there was something there. I kept working on the information. I used prior business information to determine my cost to operate. I started keeping better paper records early. Then I started using software to track my expenses. Since I now use QuickBooks to handle the backside of the business, I have many years of records to look back on, and that's important to have these records. I'll show you a spreadsheet that I've made and revised numerous times over the years. If I know what it costs me to operate and what profit margin I wish to make, I can put these numbers together to determine what to charge my client per hour and to be able to stay in business. This is the main page of the cost analysis worksheet that I've developed, and this is about probably the 10th revision of it. My salesperson absolutely has told me that she loves it, and so that's something that I really like. So we'll jump into the boring portions now. So expenses. Overhead expenses are indirect costs that are not directly related to providing a service or acquiring a product to provide to your client. They are ongoing costs that are usually fixed, meaning they remain the same amount over time. While utilities may vary month to month, they will always fall under overhead expenses. The worksheet that you see on the right side of your screen has a yearly and an hourly column. The hourly column is determined by dividing the yearly cost by 1,800 hours. I came up with 1,800 hours by taking several years of data from QuickBooks and determining that due to holidays and weather, that was about an average number that we work. It will cause your hourly to increase if you've been using the 2,080 hours that are the normal amount of working hours in a year. So advertising, well, I guess I'm getting older, and I used to use Yellow Pages advertising, but not anymore. In fact, I don't even know the last time that I seen a phone book. Social media such as Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms are becoming very important places to advertise. Thrive, which used to be the old AT&T advertising company, has replaced their Yellow Pages with an internet directory in advertising. Signage, such as the signs on your trucks, excuse me, trucks, equipment, and property. Your websites, which are a very important part of your advertising, where prospective clients can find out more about your company. Marketing literature, such as business cards, brochures, flyers, or door hangers. And then promos, gifts to give to your clients. Here at our company, at the end of each year, we send gifts to certain clients that have spent a certain level of money with us. Dues and subscription. Dues such as those paid to the International Society of Arboriculture, the Tree Care Industry Association, the American Society of Consulting Arborists, and the Better Business Bureau. And then subscriptions to our trade magazines or other relevant magazines. Office and grounds maintenance. There can be expenses associated with owning or renting your office or property, such as office cleaning, landscape maintenance, and building care and repair. And I'll tell you, as a small business owner, I do everything from cleaning the windows to removing the trees. Meetings and training. Travel expenses such as airfare, car fare, and lodging. Registration fees for workshops, conferences, expos, and other trainings. Meals for training, either in-house, feeding your crew while you're training them, which is always a bonus. And then if we're traveling, we're also going to have some meals expenses as well. Training materials often needed for receiving certifications and qualifications, whether it's from ISA or TCIA or a lot of the other groups that are out there. Then sometimes we'll take and hire a trainer to come in and work with us. Maybe new techniques, it may be reinforced.
Yeah, I saw the comments, intermission, yes, taking a short intermission. I just spoke to Gary, he's joining us. He just had a little issue with his internet. I'll take this minute while we have a little dead time that we have Raising Trees is doing another series that I think many of you may or may not be aware of. I included in the same email I sent up. It's all Spanish series called Creciendo Árboles. And we have our next webinar with Creciendo Árboles scheduled for next Wednesday, November 20th. And so if you're interested, I think it's Jesse, I think it's also on the GAA webpage. If not, if you're not getting the emails from me, we will try to get that information out.
Yes, that entire series is on the GAA events list, and we also have a dedicated Spanish page on our website that you can gain access to resources and list in that webinar series and register for those courses. So make sure to check that out if you speak Spanish.
Yeah, and I like to remind anybody that if you might know companies or individuals that are looking for Spanish speaking series. So when you get those advertises, hit that forward button and zing it over to them. We're trying to grow this series to really kind of meet those needs for, the growing number of Spanish speaking audiences. Particularly, it's been built for the US South, but I think it can, these are webinars, right? They can go national, international, so share it. And we're going to have, a number of topics related to tree care, all in Spanish. So, and I hope Gary joins us soon.
It's my fault, Bo. I told him he should be fine as long as no hurricanes go through there again. He must have had a hurricane.
You know, he's literally about 3 miles down the road from me here, and it is beautiful and sunny. It's been raining for about 5 days, but no hurricanes today. We were both on the Gulf Coast. But oh, I see that he's signed back in, so
Yay.
he's back. Gary, I think some people were wondering if we needed some popcorn for the intermission. I saw that in the chat.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. We can hear
Okay.
you now. But we're glad to have you back. Hey, as you're jumping back in, Gary, I'll just take this second. There was a question, and you might want to just go ahead and address it, that you're going to be sharing some spreadsheets and some forms, and people were asking where might those be available, if they're available. So you might just want to address that as you jump in. But I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Absolutely, and I apologize, everyone, but because of the amount of time and some of the information contained within the spreadsheets, I will not be giving those away. I have an older version. If you contact me, I can send you, but not the current one, and I apologize. I hate showing you a new toy than not having it for sale. So I hope that answers your questions. And Bo, you seeing anything pop up in response to that?
I think you're good. So I'd say carry on.
Okay. Well, again, I apologize for the technical difficulty. For some reason, tech hates me right when I need to have it the most. So I believe I was talking about postage when everything went to hell. And so postage used to be a common expense for our office, but it's been reduced since we started using email to communicate our proposals, invoices, and reports that we send to our clients. I use miscellaneous as a catch-all for things that don't neatly fall into one of these categories. This is something that's not commonly in cost analysis worksheets, but the recapturing of spent capital. So I do include this in my worksheet. And so what we've done, we've spent capital to purchase office equipment, computers, or maybe even furniture. So if we don't start recapturing that money and bringing it back into our accounts by creating an hourly charge for it, we may have to take a loan or delay buying additional equipment. And one thing that we do is we have a separate account that we put all of our capital funds into for purchases down the road. Professional fees, we may use accountants to file our taxes, bookkeepers to help us record expenses, attorneys to drop contracts, collect overdue accounts, and heaven forbid, legal issues if they arise. Consultants can assist us in different ways in our business that we may need their help. Loan interest. So if I purchase a piece of equipment, if I purchase a piece of property, that mortgage interest would fall into this category. Even though our trucks and equipment will fall under direct expenses, the interest on these loans are still going to fall under overhead expenses because it's a reoccurring expense. Insurance. This is our overhead insurance because we have to pay this whether we have any payroll or not. So that's where it falls into our overhead. So I carry property insurance in the buildings that we either rent or own. Professional liability insurance is also commonly known as errors and omissions or malpractice insurance. I'm not required to carry it by law, but since we consult with folks, offer tree risk assessments, and then also we do training with a lot of other companies and organizations, we do carry the errors and omissions insurance. An umbrella policy is additional coverage so that in the event of a loss in our general liability or professional liability that exceeds the limits of coverage, we have additional coverage there. Licenses and permits are business license, vehicle license, and then special permits. The special permits wouldn't cover our normal tree removal and pruning permits because those are going to be generated per client and will fall under our direct expenses. Miscellaneous is anything that doesn't fall into one of these other categories. Rent of our office, shop, or property. Now, I personally own the property that the business uses, the business doesn't, and I charge a rent to the business to use it. This is an overhead charge since it is paid monthly and a fixed expense. So this is the first page of the spreadsheet that I'll be using. The highlighted area where it says overhead cost is where all of our overhead is going to be computed. But when we put in service hours in the upper left box where it says travel, items 1 to 7, when we put those service hours in there, it will go ahead and populate the box for overtime costs to automatically take and calculate our expense on that. Payroll and expenses. This is going to be for employees that are not involved with field production, such as our sales personnel, office personnel, and especially for the owner. So because these payrolls are generated again without necessarily having production hours, that is why they fall into our overhead category. And I include the workers' comp and general liability for these employees right into their expenses because it's going to be considered an overhead expense. So here's a copy of the owner. And like I had said earlier, these are fake numbers. And so it's, I may or may not pay myself that. But if you look down, you'll notice that at the bottom of it, there's no listings for general liability or workers' comp. And that's usually because the owner is excluded from those calculations that the insurance companies require. Here's one for my salesperson, and we can see that all the taxes are there, fringe benefits are there. And in those fringe benefits, we're also looking at our holiday pay, vacation pay, and training hours that they're going to be receiving. And then down at the bottom, we can see our workers' comp and general liability listing as well. So when we compare these two sheets, we can see how the owner's sheet doesn't have the workers' comp or general liability listed on it. So our expenses for direct expenses are costs that are directly related to the production of a service or a product that we are using on a client's site. So here under equipment maintenance, I group trucks and equipment right into this one category. We're going to be looking at our repairs, parts, preventative maintenance. And I know preventative maintenance isn't something that we're covering on this, but I tell you, it will save you a lot of money to practice preventative maintenance with your trucks and equipment. Our equipment insurance, such as vehicle or inland marine. Inland marine is for our equipment. Now, a lot of people go ahead and put their general liability and workers' comp in here, and they are considered a direct expense, but instead of listing them here with estimated cost, I include them in the affected employees spreadsheets. That way, we're looking right at the cost per hour for those two insurances. Equipment fuel, we track ours by type. So we have our clear on-road, our dyed off-road, and then our unleaded gasoline. And we track these by fuel type so that we can tell if there's any significant changes in usage of these fuels. Materials and supplies, and this will be directly related to the production of services, our hand tools, PPE, drinks, Gatorade, water, uniforms, and then there's many, many other things to list in there that we just don't have time for. Other cost is another miscellaneous category that I use as a catch-all for everything else. Now, debris, there's a couple different tree services that I mentor, and debris is something that's left out of their calculations a lot of times. But we have disposal, tipping, and your own on-site maintenance. So here at Ickes Tree Service, we operate our own green waste site where we gather our debris until we have enough for a third-party grind company to come in and grind it for biofuel. But if we're working away from the office, we may be too far away to run back and dump here. So we go to a landfill, and that's going to generate a tipping charge. And then the on-site maintenance, years ago, we used to have some property that we did long-term dumping on of just green waste. And we tracked that expense to keep an eye on what it was costing us. Equipment recapture, this is the cost of the equipment that we've purchased. While the cost of equipment is not commonly included in an accounting type cost analysis, I do include it in the spreadsheet. So we've spent capital to purchase the truck or equipment, and they have a given lifespan. So if we don't start recapturing that money, we could have to take a loan instead of making a cash purchase at the end of the life of that truck or equipment. And again, this money could be placed into a separate account for capital purchases. And if you're storing money for a long time in the bank, make sure that you're earning some interest off of it. So here is the recapture sheet that we use. We have our actual purchase price, our lifespan, that is how long we're going to expect that piece of equipment to last in our company. Our cost per year is the actual price divided by the lifespan. Cost per hour is the cost per year divided by the 1,800 hours that I discussed earlier. And in this case, these three pieces of equipment are generating a $20.07 expense. Now, this is back to the main sheet of our spreadsheet, which is showing direct expenses without labor and with the total there. And this is generated automatically. The little box there with the 3 is automatically populated from the service hours box at the upper left. Now, our production payroll and expenses, this is going to be for our employees involved with the field production, such as crew members, PHC techs, special equipment operators. And here we can see a sheet for our crew lead. Again, we have our normal employer paid taxes, our fringe benefits, and sometimes the employees don't take full use of those fringe benefits. And then also our insurance is listed at the bottom. Now, something, again, that I do a little bit differently, and like I said at the beginning, this is my opinion, this is my take on job costing. So I break it up a little bit different than a lot of other programs do. So a direct expense such as material rental or temporary labor, they vary job to job depending on how we're using them. So that's the reason I break them out to the side. The larger highlighted box, we're showing plant material, crane rental, and temporary help. In this case, we're adding 7 3/4 hours to the temporary help, which shows on the right side as $187.94, and that populates the MRT charge on the right that is highlighted. Another direct expense that I don't factor in directly is an additional charge for own equipment. Since we're not commonly using this equipment and it has a higher cost to operate than the other, I use this section to take and calculate it. And again, the larger highlighted box, we're seeing an air compressor, mower deck, our crane that we own, and mats. Because we don't use these frequently, I keep a separate line item. Then that way their additional cost isn't being calculated into the direct expenses that would affect our sales price. We've entered our hours in there, and we can see how that total has been carried over to the right-hand side in the highlighted box. So let's bring all this information together and determine what an hourly cost for is cost for us is, and then look at the profit percentages that we can use. So here's a scenario. Our client has a large oak tree to be removed using our crane. We're going to bring in a temporary worker to help the crew during this removal, and then mats will be used to reduce damage to the yard from the crane rutting. So again, here's the main page of the spreadsheet. The highlighted boxes where we're going to be putting our service hours. We start with half an hour's travel and we end with a quarter hour of travel. The reason that those are different is we add about 15 minutes on to the beginning travel because of prepping our trucks and equipment. Item number one is 7 hours, and that's how long we're estimating the time that we're going to need to be on site to take and remove this tree. The two boxes, white boxes on the right side, you'll see that those have already been populated with 7 3/4 hours, and that is showing us our overhead cost and our direct expense cost without labor. Now we're going to look right at our labor. We have our employees listed there. The 7 3/4 hours have been manually entered in there. The right column is showing us the cost per employee. And then the labor total is listed down at the bottom of 31 hours and then $708. Now, because we're using temp labor, we're going to jump to the box for cost of material rental and temp. We've entered in the temp help section $7.75, or I'm sorry, 7 hours, 7 3/4 hours. And just to the right of that is a markup column. We don't mark up our temporary help, but the other items up there we do. And then that has already been moved over to our MRT charge on the right side, so it populates there. Now, because we're going to be using our own crane and mats, we're going to our owned equipment additional charge, put in the hours of 7 3/4. It's given us our totals in the right column, and then it's brought the entire total over to the right side under our owned equipment add charge. So we have our service hours, employee labor hours, our MRT charge, and our owned equipment add charge. And so that's bringing our cost, what we're paying just in expenses for this job, to be $3,688 and some change. The larger highlighted box on the right, we have our different profit percentages that we can charge, and they're colored in different colors, and that's going to help us calculate which percentage we're going to use. Now, we use these different percentages depending on the length of time that the client has been with us, the risk associated with the job, and then also, this is a very important one for me, is how much of a pain in the butt the client's going to be. We have one client that has been with us a very long time, and each time we go out for a proposal, we have to tell him to stay in the house, that he can't come out and help us. And because of that, we tack a few extra percentage points on just for that reason. So we've calculated our total cost that we're going to give to the client for our expense and profit. So let's take and back check this. And we've completed the job, but ran into an issue that caused the job to run a little bit longer. So let's see how this is going to take and affect our profit. So it was supposed to be 7 3/4 hours total, but they needed an additional hour. So it ended up being 8 3/4 hours of crew time, but the crane and the mat time stayed the same. We're able to get the crane out of there at the appropriate time. Here, this is the original proposal that we were putting together. So we see our service hours in the upper left with the arrow at 7. On the right side with the arrow is our total cost of the $3,600 and something dollars. And then down at the bottom, the arrow is pointing to a 20% profit margin on this job. But now because we've had to add another hour to the item, it's jumped our total expenses up to $4,000 and change. And when we plug that number in, it is causing us to have an 8% profit. We were still profitable with this job. We have added money to our capital account, but most importantly is that we have paid our bills and paid our bills in full. We don't take a loss, even with a reduced profit. Where I consider taking a loss is when I have to pay a client when the cost of the job is greater than the charge to the client. And we do primarily fixed pricing for our clients, where we will take and estimate our time and then give them a fixed price. Unless the job changes, the price doesn't change. So by back checking with the issue that we ran into, we went from $725 or 20% profit to $334 or 8% profit. Now, some of y'all are probably looking at that profit percentage and wincing a good bit, but because we've included our equipment recapture in there, our true profit is going to be a little bit better than that. So some of the reasons why we may have ended up with an increase of an hour, well, it could have been underbid. And even though I've been bidding over 30 years, I still screw up. The crew may have not been running on all the cylinders. It could have been a technical issue where access wasn't as good as we thought. But the result is a reduction of profit. And if our expenses have been covered, you've not lost money, but you would not have profited as much, but the bills would have been paid. So talking with clients, here's some good tips that I found over the years with communicating with your clients. Is during the telephone call or the first point of contact, answer the telephone as a professional. Have you ever called a contractor and they just answer the phone, hello? Well, it happens to me, and sometimes I wonder who they are and what they do because I'm not for sure if I dialed the right number. Return any messages as soon as possible. I have heard so many times from potential clients that we were the only one to return their message. And we get jobs just because our competitors don't call back. Gather all the information you can and take notes. This is going to show the client that you are interested in their work because you've taken the time to take notes and have listened to their needs. Listening to your client is very important. Inform the client up front of any possible delays that could affect them before you could start the work. If Mrs. Smith's needing the work done in 1 week, but we can't schedule her for 3, if we don't let her know up front, it's going to cause a lot of aggravation for her to find out that we can't meet her deadline. Don't be afraid to refer a client to someone else if what they want is something that you don't offer or know someone better. Or in the case of the Mrs. Smith with the delay, if you know someone that you trust to get the work done safely and efficiently, don't be afraid to refer them. We refer a fair amount of customers to other companies, and our clients remember this. And a lot of times they call us back and we end up getting sales because we took and were very professional and gave them other options. So your first meeting with the client, be on time or call to let them know. Let me ask you this. How do you feel when you're meeting with a contractor and they're late, or even worse, they don't show up and they don't call you to let you know? This is something that a lot of people do naturally, but walk to your client to shake their hand. Don't make them come to you. You're showing an importance to them and also respect by shaking their hand. Make eye contact and smile. Just think of a salesperson that you've met when they're trying to sell you something and they're looking away or they're not smiling. I take that as a sign that they may not be completely honest because they won't look me in the eye. Listen and ask questions. That's very important. You want to hear what the customer wants and ask questions for clarification. Forget the old adage, dazzle with brilliance or baffle with bullshit. That's crap. We don't need to be doing that. Let's use lay language and be honest. If that client catches us lying or thinks that we're lying, we're destroying our credibility and we're going to take and lose that sale, even if we are completely honest with them. Then let them know how you're better than other companies. We talk about our company compared to others, but we don't badmouth the other companies. If I don't have something nice to say about somebody or another company, I just keep my mouth shut. I don't believe it's professional, and your client isn't going to believe that it is professional for you to take and bad talk another company. So jumping back to listening to the client, shut up and listen. I know that seems rather harsh, but if we don't listen to what they want, how are we going to know what they want? Are we just going to tell them what they want? And will that meet their needs if we only tell them what they want? So we're going to listen to them to understand what they want. We're going to ask questions to clarify. And then we're going to repeat back to them in our own words what they're wanting to verify that we understand them. And also, you're showing concern for getting the job right. Be very careful of nonverbal actions such as crossing your arms. I mean, if I've been talking to y'all this entire time with my arms crossed, how do you think that nonverbal cue, what you would think about me? It would show a disinterest or possibly even a confrontation. So don't cross your arms. Don't look away while you're listening to them. And heaven forbid, don't mess with your phone. If you are expecting an important call and your phone rings, say, "Excuse me, I hate to do this, but I need to step away and take this call." And then when you come back, apologize for stepping away. And never miss an opportunity to upsell your work. Recently, we ended up with a crane job. The customer at first just wanted the tree removed, where we would just rope out the limbs and then drop the chunks of wood, but we upsold them to dismantling the tree with the crane in order to take and protect their yard. If you see other things that need to be done, don't be afraid to bring it to their attention. Let's not be too technical. Use lay language. So instead of saying, "Mrs. Smith, your tree will be pruned using a canopy reduction method by using reduction and removal cuts to reduce the wind forces and canopy cleaned of dead wood of X size." Well, another arborist is probably going to know what you're talking about, but just think of what that customer's thinking. They may be even zoning out on you. So let's try something as simple as, "Mrs. Smith, we're going to remove and shorten some branches so that the tree will be less affected by wind. And then we're going to remove dead wood of X size." Here we have Mr. Smith with girdling roots, and we're telling him that the girdling roots are affecting the vascular tissues of the tree, causing staghorning of the upper canopy. When you first entered arboriculture, would you have understood this? But if we try, "Mr. Smith, your tree has roots growing around the base of the tree, causing water and nutrients to have a harder time to move up the tree, causing the upper canopy to die back." That's a very simple thing for them to understand. It is technically not absolutely correct, but we're wording it in such a way that the customer is going to be able to understand it. Let your client know of any possible issues before they occur. So I'm telling Mrs. Smith that we're going to take and move several shrubs in order to access the tree for removal, and we'll replant the shrubs at the end of the job. There's been several times that we didn't let a customer know this particular thing, and we're digging up the bushes and they come out yelling at us because we didn't inform them about that up front. Then Mr. Smith went with the cheaper option with us of just dropping the pieces of trunk instead of using a crane to dismantle the tree. And we're going to tell them that there may be some dents in the yard at the end of the job due to removing the tree. I would never tell a customer that we're just dropping pillows. I see that in a lot of Facebook posts, but we have to be professionals, right? So we're going to tell them that we're dropping chunks of wood, that it could dent the yard, and we're going to do our best to keep that to a minimum. And then also, this is another chance potentially to upsell it, and we can fill them with dirt once we're done for an additional charge. Let them know if your backlog is greater than what they need. In this case, we're telling them that we're going to be it's going to be about 2 to 3 weeks before we can get there, and that there could be delays due to weather. Please be patient with us while we try to get your work scheduled. And I'll put this one in for a couple different reasons. One is just safety to get folks to start thinking about this, but Mrs. Smith will need to wait for the power company to come out and prune the trees away from the power lines. They make their own schedule, and we must wait on them so that our employees can do the work safely. Don't feel rushed and put your employees at risk by having them work too close to conductors unless they are qualified to do so. So after the first meeting, follow up with your client. Ask them if they have any questions or concerns. Be prepared to explain the value of your service and how your service may be different from others. And then this wording may be a little off, but be careful of looking needy by dropping your price unless the scope of work is changed for the job. When we go out at Ickes Tree Service and provide a quote to a client, if they ask us for a discount, we don't give them one. We know what it cost us to cover our bills and to make the profit margin that we need to make. If we did drop that charge, the next time that the customer calls us, they're going to expect the same thing again, and it can create a vicious cycle with this client where you're always having to drop your cost. So at the start of the job, either the salesperson or the crew lead should meet with the client, review the job, walk the yard with them, ask if they have any questions or concerns. Then ask them if they want any additional work that they want performed. Sometimes the client just is hesitant to mention that they want extra work done. We're giving them an opening or a chance to upsell the job. At the end of the job, either the salesperson or the crew lead should meet with the client again, inform them of any damage, review the job to verify that all the work has been performed and that it's satisfactory to the client. This does a couple things. Again, it shows that we are concerned with the quality of our job to the client, and also it can keep us from having to make a return trip out. If we have to return to that job site, that's going to cause travel time, additional work time, and will significantly affect our profit. And then ask them if they have any questions or concerns. Depending on what your policy is, they can either ask for payment or let the client know that an invoice will be sent to them. If there was damage, and this is something that happens at one point in everybody's career, that there is damage, inform the client right away. Don't wait. It can look like you're hiding the damage from the client, and they're not going to be as reasonable to deal with if we let them know up front. If it's your fault, own it. If we break something, if we just admit it right up front, the consequences are generally a lot less. Listen to the client, how they feel about it, and don't let your emotion get in the way. We're already upset because we've screwed up and caused damage, and we have to take and check our emotions so that we can listen to them in order to figure out what they are wanting us to do to correct this. Seek to understand the client's view. We had something happen once where I don't want to say a family heirloom, but a hard to replace item was damaged, and the customer didn't want it repaired. They didn't want it replaced. They didn't want money. What they wanted from us was an acknowledgement that we screwed up, that we were going to own the situation, and then apologize to them. And since that thing, we've worked twice more for that client. and apologize. And then find a solution and fix it in a timely manner. The longer you procrastinate, generally the longer before you get back to the job to fix it. And again, that's something that the client's not going to appreciate, and they're going to feel that you're maybe just blowing them off. If we have an issue, we don't collect payment until the issue is resolved. That way the customer has their money and they know that we're going to fix that problem so that we can get paid. After the job is completed, follow up with a thank you. Again, you're being respectful to them. Ask what you could improve on. This gives an opening to the client to come to you with concerns that they had. Could be something as simple as, a candy wrapper was left in the bushes. Ask if they have any concerns about the job. Ask them if they would refer you to friends and family and ask for a review. All these things are giving you an opportunity, or giving the client an opportunity to speak up on something that you're deficient with. And so thank you very much for your time today. I hope that you found this useful and informative. If not, please let me know how I can improve upon this. And here is my contact information. In addition to owning a tree service, we also provide safety training, and we're starting to offer business consulting. Hello, Bo.
Gary, thank you very much. A fantastic presentation. I think it was really well laid out to run us through this side and exactly what we were looking for. I hope everybody picked something up through this presentation. I just wanted to highlight real quickly, Jesse McCullough put into the chat box the form to fill out for ISA CEUs. Is that correct, Jesse? Y'all do it a
It's
little
there
quick.
now.
Okay, so everybody needs to click on that link and fill that out. Is that correct? For ISA CEUs.
Yes, and there's a couple of other questions in there as well, just for some feedback. So if you don't mind giving us some feedback, we'd really appreciate you doing that. It should take less than 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, I think that's a requirement we put into the project. Please take a minute to fill out that information. As I mentioned, this is being funded through the Forest Service. I need to be able to report back, and it'll certainly help us with that process. So take a few minutes. The link is in your chat box. We got a couple minutes left, and real quick, we do have a couple questions, and I'll ask those. But I just wanted to remind everybody that this is the second webinar in a series on what we're part of Raising Trees, that we're terming the business of arboriculture, that we're doing in partnership with UGA and GAA. Our next webinar is January 30th, and it's going to be looking at another business topic. It's going to be looking at insurance for tree care businesses, kind of delving into that world a little bit deeper. We'll be back in February looking at marketing. How do you market your tree service? And then we'll be back in March for issues related to taxes. And then we'll conclude in April on managing a productive workforce. So how to attract people to work for you, how to keep your employees. And so we hope to be able to run everybody through that series. So Gary, we had a couple quick questions. I know some of you might need to jump off right at the end of the hour. That will not affect your CEUs. But for those that want to stay around for a couple more minutes, I'll go through these couple of questions. The first question, Gary, somebody asked is, what was the number of hours per work year that you would recommend for use for developing the hourly rate? They say commercial factors as opposed to government norms can change the amount. Is it based on actual worked hours or hours worked plus downtime for maintenance, bidding, etc.?
Well, what we do to determine our hourly rate is we take 1,800 hours and divide that into our yearly expense to calculate the hourly for that. The reason I came up with 1,800 hours is if we look at our normal holidays that we observe, anywhere from 6 to 8 days, if you're just hitting the big ones. Then weather, I'm in South Alabama, and it's not uncommon to get a couple days straight of rain and then the yards to be too wet to get in and out of. So by looking at holidays, weather, And then also at the end of the year, we give our employees off from Christmas Eve through January 2nd, and that's paid as a thank you to them. So all that comes in to give us that 1,800 hours per year. And as far as the downtime for maintenance and bidding, we have that divided up. I do a lot of the maintenance while the crew's out working, or I'll come in on a Saturday for that. Bidding is handled by my salesperson, so it doesn't affect crew productivity. And we run every year, we're probably 1,750 through 1,850 hours, so that we found that 1,800 average works for us very well. And I see a second question here. An example of a job, there's extra time for prep and mobilization. How do you account for cost for equipment cleanup, maintenance, and repair time, debris disposal? Is this all backed into the 7 hours of work time in this example? Well, if you remember, the travel time in the beginning was half an hour instead of a quarter hour. So we were putting equipment prep and mobilization right into that. And that's something I found that a lot of companies miss, is the time to travel to and from the job site, that they leave that out of their bids and they wonder why they're always making less money. Now, as far as the equipment cleanup, maintenance, and repair time, like I had just mentioned, that's something that I do, or we send it out to a third party for those. And so it generally does not affect the productivity time of the crew, but if they're missing an important piece of equipment, it can. We have backups of a lot of our equipment and trucks so that we can avoid downtime just because a piece is broken. And so, Alan, did that answer your questions?
And Gary, there was another question here from George. I think it's one of the last ones. It says, how would you handle callback from the business standpoint? Let's say that a client are not happy with the tree work and potentially don't want to pay, bad debt expense, how would you handle a bad review? So,
Okay.
great questions.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question for this. And so how do we handle a callback? First of all, we're going to make sure that it is something that was in the original scope of work. If it is, we're going to apologize and get back out there as quickly as we can to fix it. If it's not in the scope of work, we're going to discuss it with the client and if talk about the additional expense with it. And if they want it done, that goes more into a normal schedule. But if the client's not happy with the tree work, either through yard damage or property damage, something like that, well, that's where you own it, you step up, you fix it. And if you fix it, the customer 99.9% of the time is going to go ahead and pay you. If they don't want to pay you, you're in a tight little spot. We do everything under contract. We have language in there about if we have to turn it over for collections of getting reasonable legal fees. But I've never done that. Well, I say I've never done it. I've only done it once of taking somebody to small claims court in 30-something years. If it's a small dollar job and they have a legitimate complaint, sometimes I'll just take and forgive the debt, but that's, my decision and my policy. But if they don't want to pay, you do your best to make them as happy as you can. And sometimes that's their compromise. You do what they, as much as you can towards what they want, and it may even be a negotiated lowering of the price. And I hope that, now, how do you handle a bad review? Ooh, that's something we've had happen twice. One was a gentleman that owned an equipment company. I made a comment on Facebook that he didn't like. He went and left a bad review. I was able to contact Facebook and had it removed. And then we had a customer give us a 3-star on Google because he didn't like our price. We didn't do any work. He just didn't like the price. I chatted with him on email, discussed why I thought it was inappropriate for a 3-star review, and we compromised on a 4. And then I went to that review and I made a response that everybody was able to see, kept it professional. And we haven't seen any issues from that.
Gary, thank you very much for a fantastic webinar on job costing in the tree care industry. I know you put a lot of time into this, and I think a lot of positive reviews. So thank you for sharing your knowledge of 30 years in the industry. Thank you, Jesse, for the support for GAA and being a partner in the series. And I also want to thank my other partner in the series, University of Georgia, the Warnell School of Forestry, and just remind everybody this is being funded through the U.S. Forest Service. So thanks for their support for this series. With that, we'll bring today's webinar to a conclusion and remind everybody we will be back with this series in January with the next one on the business of tree care. And also remember, next week, we're going to have Creciendo Árboles, so our all Spanish webinar series coming next week. For any of those Spanish speakers, please join us next week, or please share it to anybody that might benefit from that. With that, thank you all very much, and see you all next time.
Thank you, Bo, and thank you, Gary. Great presentation.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to come on and give this information out.